Welcome to A Second Helping with Allison Bartow, a wedding photography podcast with a focus on second shooting. At today's wedding, the bride was considering cutting back photo coverage because she was worried about having a photographer in her face. She almost gets sent down the aisle before the groom, and the Rolls Royce catches on fire. So tune in to find out how this ended up being one of my favorite weddings of the year, if not of all time. Hi. It's a gorgeous Saturday in October on my way over to New Jersey. It's about 60 degrees, really nice out, sunny. Haven't really even looked at the weather. We don't have too many things outside today. So I'm on my way over to Spring Lake, New Jersey to associate shoot for Nicole. I have associate shot for her once before. That was the time when my Ford Bronco died in the middle of the city at 11:30 at night. However, I digress. Today, I'm on my way to New Jersey. I am going to first stop off at the venue where the reception is to drop off light stands and flashes and just get my eyes on the venue. Then I'm going to head over to a hotel that's like across the road. I'm going to head over there to drop off cards for the second shooter. And then I will head over to the bride's parents' house for bride prep. Everything, it looks like, is within just a couple miles of each other, which is good. So I'll have bride prep. The planner is going to be there as well. We'll do that for a couple of hours. Then we'll head over to the church, hour-long ceremony, grand exit with ribbons. Then we head over to the venue where we have about an hour and 15 minutes to do all of the post portraits. So family formals, then wedding party, then couples portraits, then an hour and a half cocktail hour, then reception. We are done at 9. So our coverage is 11 to 9. I had a call with the bride and the planner a couple weeks ago. The bride was very nice, but the planner said she seemed like she was just getting really stressed about everything coming up. And then luckily, I got the planner on the phone before I got the bride on the phone and just said, hey, is there anything else I need to know? And the planner let me know that the bride had recently asked about cutting photo coverage time down because she didn't want a photographer in her face while she was getting her makeup done and then telling her to like pose and do stuff. So it was really good to know because if someone's trying to decrease their time with you, kind of a red flag. We got on the phone and started talking. I just kind of wanted to hear what her, concerns were. So I think I did a good job of reassuring her that I would not be in her face. I let her know that when I get there, I'm typically going to be shooting any details if they're there. If she is interested in a flat lay, I would set that up and shoot that then. But if not, I'm just going to kind of be casually shooting what's going on, natural interactions as they're happening, and I'm not going to be telling people to do anything or do any poses. So interestingly enough, I had seen on the timeline she had a robe/PJ shot. So I did ask her, oh, I see that you have a robe shot on here. Is that something that you were interested in doing? And she was like, oh, yeah, maybe. We'll see. And I said, okay, just wanted to check. I said, so day of, I'll check in with you. And if you're interested in doing that, we'll get that set up. I said, but that would be really one of the few other post things that we would have doing. Otherwise, I would just be capturing what's happening. I said we would get, like some bridal portraits with you once you're dressed. And then they have a Rolls Royce coming. Family friend owns it, so they're coming. So she wants pictures with her parents and the Rolls Royce. As we were going through the timeline, I feel like the timeline probably could have had a little bit more padding. It makes me not crazy. It makes me curious when people have a timeline that it's like ceremony 1:30 to 2:30, guests exit, leave 2:40, photos at 2:45, because it's like human nature, the way crowds work. If you've got 100 plus people exiting a church, it is one of the slowest processes, and then they're like lingering. You're also talking about doing like a staged photo exit, and then people have like it's going to take longer for all of those things to happen, and it's just not padded to accommodate for like what really goes on. But the biggest thing is going to be all of these portraits happening in an hour and 15 minutes. And I was explaining that, we're good as long as everyone's where they need to be. I can move through the list efficiently. But if someone's missing, that's where we get slowed down. And it was also very confusing because she started saying that the trolley would drop off the wedding party and then go back to the church to get the groom's extended family. Because I knew that she was already a little bit like stressed and whatever, I didn't press her on this. But then later on, when I was talking to the planner, I said, I'm just curious, like, who is coming on the trolley and how did they get to the church? Because they didn't come via the trolley. So I don't know. And so the planner didn't know either. So I was like, okay, I'm just curious because if we're waiting on these people, I was just a little bit curious about their transportation arrangements because I wasn't understanding it logistically. So we're going through who needs to be there for the post formals and all of that. And then I said something about you've got extended cocktail hour. And then the bride said, yes, I don't want to miss a minute of cocktail hour. And I also need at least 15 minutes before it starts because I want to go sit down and get something to eat. And I said, okay. So that was a new development because typically when you have an extended cocktail hour, it's wonderful because instead of 60 minutes, you've got 90 minutes. So if you eat into cocktail hour, no pun intended, they still have a good portion of cocktail hour to make. They're not doing a first look. So this is our only chance for these post portraits. So that was a surprise. The planner didn't know that either, that she wanted to attend all of cocktail hour. That's where the big pressure is going to be, is just getting everything done when we need to. And then she keeps moving things up. When I got the original timeline, it said planner leaves at 7, photographers leave at 9, cake cutting at 9. And so I did say to the planner in an email, hey, you might want to move cake cutting up to like 8:30 or 8:45 because we're scheduled to leave at 9. So they did move that up. And then when we were on the call with the bride, she was like, let's move it up more. She goes, can we do that before we eat dinner? So the planner was like, sure, I'll ask them. I don't know. I mean, you don't need a lot of people from the venue to set up the cake cutting, but if they're all trying to run entrees and bus salads, I don't know that they're going to be super jazzed about that, but we'll see. There were a few like kind of moving around pieces. I got the final timeline. It all looks fine. I also got the family shot list. I put that in order. It's not crazy, so that should be good. I also feel like this could be one of those situations where you get one impression of the bride and then the day of, it's a little bit different. I've had brides that, whether it's via their email or a phone call with them, they seem very intense and type A, that they're going to be micromanaging things on the wedding day. And you get a little bit nervous because that can sometimes be too much and it's counterproductive. But then on the wedding day, there's so much going on that they're just going with it and they're fine and everything's happening and they don't have time to micromanage things. And it's just like a big relief because you're like, oh, I thought this was going to go one way and it's very different. Not always the case, but it's always kind of nice when that happens when you're kind of expecting the worst. But a challenge to associate shooting is I didn't have any communication with the bride up until the call a week or two before the wedding. So I don't really know her personality at all.
We are back. Now for this wedding, I would say I was more nervous than I am for most weddings. And again, I'm associate shooting, hadn't met the bride before, had that one conversation with her. So I get there and I made really good timing driving to New Jersey. I can see on my GPS that I'm like 2 blocks from the beach. So I drove down to the beach. I got out. It's a gorgeous day. I walked on the boardwalk for a little bit. Candidly, I didn't want to start shooting at the house any earlier than need be because she'd already expressed that she thought she had like more coverage than she needed. So I went in at about 4 minutes until our start time. Beautiful home. Parents were lovely. All the bridesmaids were nice. And it was like this nice open floor plan, which was great, but also there was like no place to hide. And I say that because I didn't want to be in the bride's face, but I also didn't want to be just like standing around. And so I was trying to get some like establishing shots. I, talked to the parents a little bit. The planner got there not too much later than I did. The bride was like finishing up her makeup. So I got some shots from like a little bit far away, a little, zoomed in a little bit. The makeup artist was then getting her own pictures. So she had the light on her and she was posing her. So I just used that opportunity to get additional photos of her without me being the one giving her direction. So I said to the planner, I'm going to see if I can get her ring, and maybe, the bouquets had just been delivered. They were beautiful. I thought, I'd get some shots of the ring with the bouquet. So I asked the bride, I said, did you have your ring? I can get some shots of that with the flowers. And she was just like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And she was wearing her ring, but it was just funny. I was like, all right. So I was just kind of trying to get what I could and just kind of get whatever candids were possible. And then we chatted a little bit. We're about 45 minutes into the day, and the girls had decided to go. They were going out on the front porch. And so I followed them out there. And so it's the bride, a bunch of her bridesmaids, and me. And then the bride's like, oh, will you get a picture of me and, this bridesmaid and this bridesmaid? And I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm taking the pictures. And then she stopped and she says to her bridesmaids, oh, my God. I was on the phone with Allison and I was all like, I don't want post pictures. I don't want you in my face. I want to blah, blah, blah. She goes, and now look at me. I'm like, oh, take my picture. And I was like, no, it's great. It's, perfect. It works for me. And from that moment on, everything was great. It was really nice of her to say that. She didn't need to say that, but it was just really like disarming because it was something that was like weighing on my mind. And then it put me at ease because I knew that like she was fine. At one point she had gone upstairs and I was talking to the mom. The mom had mentioned her own makeup and she was like, do I look all right? And I was like, yeah, you look beautiful. And she made a comment like she's just an old hippie who's a surfer or something, just doesn't wear makeup. And so she was very laid back. And then she said her daughter, the bride, is, I don't know if she's like super intense, but she said, she works in Manhattan in like mergers and acquisitions. She works with, intense guys all day. So she's, adapted to like that environment. And I was like, got it. That makes sense. That's good to know. And I said, that's very impressive. But that also helped me to understand that she was just going to be straightforward and right to the point. And that's perfect. I love that. I would much rather know exactly what somebody wants and in the moment know what they want and not being super polite and, afraid to hurt someone's feelings. And then, we don't have like time later. Like this is the wedding day. This is when we need to get what we need to get. So I need to know in the moment how someone's feeling, what they want, what they don't want. So that is my preference all day long rather than, I don't want someone being super nice and then like telling somebody else something or later, so that was good to know. So that helped me. And that's probably all like within the first hour. At one point we went upstairs. She was getting into her dress and her mom was there. Her sister was there. And she put the veil on and she was like trying to figure out if she should wear the veil, how she should wear the veil. And so she was like asking my opinion. And then I actually took like a few pictures of her to show her like what it looked like on the camera. And so it just started to feel like she was trusting me and we were working together. And it really like the day started off great. And so it really helped with like all of those nerves. And she was fantastic. Her sister, everybody was really great. So she had, as I mentioned before, this Rolls Royce coming to pick up her and her parents and drive them to the ceremony. And so she's on the phone and I hear the Rolls Royce caught on fire. The engine something caught on fire with the Rolls Royce. So that Rolls Royce isn't coming. And then she tells me that her dad's business partner or her father-in-law's business partner, one of the dad's business partners, is trying to get a different like vintage classic car and put it on a private plane and fly it to the wedding. And I'm like, oh, okay. Meanwhile, I used to work in logistics. It's less than an hour before we need to go to the church. So I'm thinking that's not going to happen. But I just nodded along. And then she was like, I told him not to bother with it. It's fine. I'll just go on the trolley with the girls. It'll be okay. So she was fine with that. And then she got gorgeous dress, beautiful dress. Her look for the church, I'm terrible at describing dresses, but this was like an off-the-shoulder dress with like long sleeves. She ended up wearing the veil like up in her hair coming down, and she was worried. Her sister said, "You look like Mary Magdalene," but she looked really pretty. She is stunning. She is just very chic, beautiful. She reminds me of like Carolyn Bessette Kennedy or like Gwyneth Paltrow, just very beautiful and stunning and like great features. And so I love, like, for the church, it was a really good look. It was a very like classic, pretty, perfect for the church, beautiful look. And it was flattering on her. I loved it. She got dressed. She was a little I think getting nervous, like getting into the dress, she was getting nervous. And I think that that's probably typical for most brides, that's like when it really starts to set in. And so she'd like mentioned that. So that was good to know. Like it helps me to know like if someone's like getting a little bit anxious or a little bit nervous, just so that I'm aware of it. And I think her bridal party was great, but in some weddings, people are so busy with what they have going on that they may not be picking up on it. And so I feel like at least if I know, I can be like looking out for different things or making sure to not add to it. And so she had mentioned that. And so I was just aware of that. We went downstairs. She ended up like sitting downstairs on the sofa with a couple of her bridesmaids and then just like talking and laughing and telling stories. And like you could tell she was calming down, and her parents were there. And so it was really sweet talking with her dad about like some of the planning process. And so she was talking about how she had insisted on having a martini luge for the cocktail hour, and not just one, but two, so that you could do the gin or the vodka martini luge. Her dad was kind of teasing her, and she was, how laughing about how insistent she was about it. And so everybody was excited for that. And we got nice candid photos there. She ended up wanting those original PJ photos that we talked about. And again, it's one of those things where I can't tell sometimes if the planner just puts things in the timeline because they're used to it. They kind of plug it in and maybe haven't talked to the bride, but we did get those. They came out cute. She had 8 bridesmaids, so it was a lot. Like we were able to make it work on the sofa, but then once they were all dressed, trying to get a photo of like 9 ladies lined up, I was like backing up. And I think I ended up like going out the sliding glass door and shooting like into the house. But we got good photos. Their dresses were like a beautiful sage color. I liked all the colors of the wedding. The bouquets were just green and white. Beautiful. We were on time. We were a little early, I think, for everything. So everything was smooth there. Got to the church. Everything was good at the church. And the second shooter was there. He was very nice. I think he asked me something like, "What do you want me to do?" And I was like, "Oh." So I like gave him a quick run, but like, I don't know how much information he was looking for. Like I gave him the basics. We're getting started. One of the times during a wedding when I get nervous, or like one of the parts that I find slightly difficult, is at the top of the aisle with the groom, and you're shooting the bride coming down the aisle and the groom's reaction, because I'm shooting her far away, him really close, her in darker lighting, him in brighter lighting. And so like making those quick adjustments. So I always just get nervous for that because I want to get both reactions and all the expressions. So that's one time during the day where it's like, you're not going to recreate that moment. It's really important, but you're dealing with different distances, different lighting. And so the guys come down, the girls come down, and all of a sudden I see the doors open at the back of the church, and it's the bride and her father. Now, we did not do a first look. Whether or not you do a first look, coming down the aisle is still really important. But when you have not done a first look, and this is the very first moment the groom is going to see the bride the day of the wedding, that's a really important moment. And the doors open and I see her and her dad, and I turn and the groom's not there. And I look back at them. I look at the mom. I look back, the groom's not there. And I can see he is in the back of the church. The groom is in the back far corner of the church. He hadn't been sent down the aisle. And so I looked at the mom, and we realize exactly what's going on. And I'm trying to like signal to the bride. They can't see me. I'm probably one of the last people they're going to be paying attention to. And so I said something to mom, like, do you want me to go? And she was like, "Yes, please." And so I'm like kind of not running, maybe like a light jog, like down the aisle. And I'm trying to like signal, like I'm giving the like cut sign under my chin to the dad and to the bride, and they're not seeing me. And then I'm doing like the full like hands, like waving, like no, like wait. And they're fluffing the dress and they're getting ready. And I'm like, oh my God, because I can see him and he is maybe 15 feet away from them. And if she takes 2 steps forward, his first look of his bride is going to be like the profile with her dad closer to him. Like it's going to be her walking down the aisle in front of him. And so I'm like getting to the end and I start yelling the planner's name. I'm like, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. And finally the bride or the dad looked at me and I was like, wait. And I was like, step back. And they were like, what? And I said, he hasn't gone down the aisle yet. I was like, he's over there. And they were like, what? And I said, he hasn't come down the aisle yet. Like he's not in position. And they were like, oh my gosh. So they backed up and the planner was like, what? And I said, the groom's not down the aisle yet. And she was like, I asked someone and they said he was. And I was like, well, he's not. So let's get these doors closed. So we had the bride and her dad back up. We closed the doors. And then I had the groom come and walk down the aisle. And my heart was racing. And I got back down in position. And her mom looked at me and she was just like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, you're welcome. Whew. Like, so that like was a blur because it would have been, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it would have sucked. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like you do all this planning and like, what would you have done? Been like, how far would she have gotten before like she realized? And then what does she do? Turn around and walk back? Like, what is he like? I can't even imagine. And everything was perfect. It was like storybook beautiful. It ends up going great. It's a beautiful ceremony. She looks great with her veil. They're a beautiful couple. We end up, I think we wrapped up a little bit short of an hour. They were in the back corner of the church. I got some nice photos of them. The ribbons were handed out. So we did the recessional through the doors. Those pictures came out great. We got to the venue for the reception and we probably started formal photos about 15 minutes later than what was on the timeline. And this was the part of the day that I was so nervous about because I didn't have a lot of time. And she had expressed, not only did she not want to miss cocktail hour, but she wanted to stop any photos 15 minutes before cocktail hour even started. So I let the planner know, I let the second shooter know. I said, look, this is so important that we get what we need to get and we do it in like an orderly, efficient fashion because we need to get these photos and keep her, happy. And so one of my challenges was the planner did not come over to where we were taking pictures. She was like in the tent, like moving candles around. And my second shooter, who was very nice, I don't think he had a ton of experience with weddings. So it was kind of like all on me. And the challenge we had was lighting. We were on a golf course. And so I asked the venue lady earlier, like, where are the great shots that people normally do their group photos? So she showed me this like grove of trees. So we were working with like some spotted light. It wasn't like a good amount of even shade. So it was trying to like get people in the right position and like move someone up 3 inches, move someone else back 3 inches. I feel like we were missing a couple people initially. So we like had to like switch up the order and start shooting one thing. And then those people showed up. So we had to like switch tracks again. But we ended up getting full wedding party, the bride and groom with each of their people, each of the bridesmaids, each of the groomsmen. We were able to get all the family photos and the couples photos in 32 minutes. And what was funny was we did wedding party. I think we finished wedding party and then we did families and then the bride was like, all right, great. And she started leaving. And I was like, wait. I was like, we need to do like couples photos. And she was like, what? And I was like, we need to get some couples photos. So we got the couples photos, but we were only in like one location. And I was like, did you want to do anything else? And she was like, nope, I'm good. And I was like, all right, you're all set. So she was happy. Again, 32 minutes for all of it. Those were all the formals. I had said to the second shooter, I was like, I mean, I just need you to have heard that. I said, I'm nervous. I don't want the studio to be like, wait, what do you mean? Like, it was 32 minutes of formal photos. That's just what made me nervous because it was just so fast and it was all in one location. It was pretty. We made the light work. But, and again, the planner wasn't, not that she would have necessarily done a lot, but like when that is the toughest part, anybody else helping to wrangle is helpful versus trying to shoot it and wrangle and call names and do all of that at once. But we made it work. So we were actually then ahead of schedule. It was a gorgeous day. The venue was beautiful. The tent was like a sailcloth tent with like the perfect amount of string lights in it. The tables were beautiful. The head table was long and then a U. So it was wedding party with, I think their guests, like their dates were able to sit with them. Everybody was in, like everybody meaning guests, the whole guest list was in beautiful dresses. Everybody looked stunning. It was like the most attractive wedding guest list that I've ever seen. And everybody was nice. I don't think there was nobody was rude or there, normally there's like one or two, just like people that are just a little bit off. That we didn't have it. Everybody was great. The cocktail hour was like outside and inside. The second shooter, he got nervous when he saw that we had like inside areas for cocktail hour. I don't think he was super comfortable with flash. And I think he only had like one on camera flash. So I tried to make sure I was doing a lot of laps inside because I was shooting like bounce flash and those pictures came out great. Cocktail hour was easy. It was a 90-minute cocktail hour. Everything was on track. We got started. Speeches were fantastic. Just great, funny, poignant, tearful, beautiful speeches all around. Dances went great. We had cake cutting because she had wanted to do the cake cutting before dinner. So we went over to do the cake cutting. She cut the cake. She kissed the groom. And then she started to leave. And I was like, well, what? I was like, did you want to like feed each other the cake? And she's like, nope, I'm good. And she ran off. I went back and looked. 50 seconds of cake cutting. That was it. The parents had come over. The groom's mom was there. And one of us was like, did you want some cake? And she goes, I love desserts. And so she came over and she was eating the cake. So we have pictures of the groom and his mom eating cake. But the bride ran off and she changed into her reception dress. So I think in like less than 8 minutes, she came out and she had changed. Again, I'm terrible at doing dress descriptions, but she had on like a silk spaghetti strap, like I'm going to say like a cow. It's not a cow neck, but it was like the drapey front and it was just very sleek. And the scarf, like the neck scarf thing. And so it was a great look. And it was like a nice switch up from like her more formal, chic, elegant look earlier in the day. Like this was perfect for like partying in the sailcloth tent reception space. She was seated. At one point, I was talking to the planner and the bride's sister came up and said, she's getting upset. Dinner was supposed to be served 8 minutes ago. And the planner was like, I'll go talk to them. And the sister walked away and the planner looked at me and she said, I mean, I put it on the timeline, but like, I can put anything down there that I want. It doesn't mean that they're going to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. And that just struck me as so bizarre because, yeah, you can put anything you want on a timeline, but you don't. Like, you, in my mind, you go talk to the vendor to say, hey, the bride's looking to do this at this time and this at this time. Can we do that? Because they have certain parameters to turning things around and how quickly they can do things. And they're also a golf club and they still have like members there. I have no idea how that works with the kitchen and everything else. So I think the bride had said she wanted dinner served at a certain time and the planner just put it on the timeline. But I don't know that the kitchen ever said we can do that. So that was surprising to me because I just wouldn't think that that's how you would go about doing that. And I was like, oh. And then they got dinner out pretty soon after that. But I mean, also at that point, like either it's coming or it's not. Like you can't at that point hurry dinner up. Like you really can't make them move any faster, really. In my mind, like it's either coming or it's not. And if they need more time, they need more time. They can only hurry up so much, I would think. But, I didn't spend a ton of time in food service. I was a retail girl. I had a short stint in the restaurant world. The guests started dancing and they danced the rest of the night. They had a great time. It was a packed dance floor. The band was great. Everybody loved them. At one point, the band called somebody up on stage, and it was a guest. I feel like it was a cousin, but I could totally be making that up. And she was singing a song and she was amazing. And so the bride and groom just had like the best expressions on their faces, and they were just dancing the rest of the night. Like they just had a great time. And you could then see, like, as much as they enjoyed the wedding and the ceremony and all of that, they really were looking forward to celebrating with their family and friends and just partying and having a good time. And so, like, seeing the bride moving through the evening, you were like, okay, she knew what she wanted to do and how she wanted to get things done and move things along and not draw things out. And they had this great band. And I loved it. I think the lighting from the photography standpoint worked out. I had one camera on shutter drag and then one that was just a little bit more like true to what was happening and then bouncing flash off the tent ceiling. And I liked the photos. I have been shooting more stop down. I've been shooting reception dancing from like 5.6 to f8, and that's helped to just keep everything sharp and the camera's not hunting for focus. I've been shooting with like more of a bigger box for the focus area. And also towards the end of the year, I started turning off eye detection. So I feel like the camera now just has a bigger area to not worry about. And it's also not looking for subject detection or eye detection. And so that's been great. I look back to like a few years ago when I first switched over to the mirrorless and just being so frustrated at the receptions. It felt like every other shot was like out of focus or soft or focusing on something else. So I feel like that's really gotten dialed in this past wedding season. And then I did get an email from the bride, and she said, "Thanks so much for everything. Allison was truly amazing and really helped me stay calm on my wedding day. She really went above and beyond. My parents, the groom, and I all agreed that she was the best vendor through this entire wedding, and we will be recommending Allison and your studio to our friends with upcoming weddings." And that just really made my day, my week, my month, probably a highlight for the year, because it was a wedding going into it that I was nervous about. Just talking to a bride for the first time 10 days before the wedding and hearing her say that like she feels like she would like to cut back coverage because essentially she's like not looking forward to that part of the day. You're working for someone else on that day and you're just like, oh my God. Going from that to like how the day unfolded and how wonderful it was working with her parents, his parents, the couple, everybody, and getting really good pictures that they really liked. They were very happy with photos. I was proud of the photos, and it was so smooth. Even as fast paced as it was at times, it still felt smooth, and I feel like it was a huge success, and I was really happy with it. And that's on how to end on a high note. So thank you so much, and I will be back with another wedding soon. So just to wrap up, looking back at the wedding, I really don't think there's anything I would have done differently. I'm so happy that I talked to the bride before the wedding. I'm glad that the planner told me what some of her concerns were. I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. I think so much of a successful wedding day is communication and expectations, as well as matching their energy and just being aware of kind of what they're feeling or their mental state, so that you're kind of meeting them at the right place. If somebody's really upbeat and happy and excited and you want to match that. If someone's getting a little bit more anxious, you want to kind of dial it back and make sure that you're not doing anything to add to that anxiety, and just kind of see what needs to be done in the moment to alleviate that and be a calming presence. So much of the day, while it is for us about getting good pictures and knowing how to get great pictures, it's also in how the couple, as well as their family, friends, guests, how they feel on the wedding day. So And that's really, really important because you could end up with beautiful photos, but if their memories of their interaction with you on that day isn't good, then it's not really worth it. I don't think most people would think it would be worth it. So I just really, again, was proud of the photos, but happy with how they felt everything went. And even the feedback I was getting during the day was helpful and made me feel good. And like I said, I was still a little nervous during the day, only because when you're working for a studio and they're not there, I worry that they're going to look at like timestamps and say, oh my gosh, you only did, 30 minutes, or why weren't there more locations for couples photos, or why was this not in there, or why is this in there? And that can be tough, I think, for a studio going through the photos. But the studio was very happy, so that made me happy. And obviously the couple was happy and their family. So I really, going back, we were lucky with all the things that were out of our control as far as weather, lighting, the Rolls Royce catching on fire. Thankfully, it wasn't a big deal. Timeline went smoothly. So we were really fortunate with that. We were fortunate that everything was beautiful. The venue, the church, everything, the flowers, the dresses. We had a lot of things that worked in our favor. And like I said, I couldn't think of anything else I would have wanted on that wedding day. So it was definitely a big highlight. And thank you again for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to A Second Helping. Please like and subscribe.